Let's look at this example. Residential versus non-residential buildings in Johannesburg. You've got about 1 million buildings. If you look at that magical line again appears. Even here, that you have the north versus the south. Those two circles indicate in the top left, Diepsloot, in the middle right is Alexandra. Those are all the business opportunities or non-residential buildings. You suddenly see there's significantly more of them in the north than in the south. But when we look here, there's quite a couple of people still living in the south. And those are the challenges that Joburg sits with. Informal versus backyard structures. Here's the big mind-blowing problem. They think, and they thought in December, that the challenge with respect to backlogs was informals. There's about 160,000 informal structures within Johannesburg. There's over 270,000 backyard structures in Joburg. I'm going to show you some pictures of this, and it's a significant challenge to decision makers and policy makers of what do we do about it. Do we ignore it? Do we change policy? Or do we add those 270,000 to the backlog and add them to the 160,000? It's a question we're able to ask because we now finally have the data to quantify this. Everybody talks about the city of gold. Ironically, there's not much mining infrastructure in Johannesburg because there's only 355 buildings. All the mining is either in Ekurhuleni or on the other side in the West Rand. If you've ever realized, they called it Joburg International Airport, but you didn't land in Joburg, you landed in Ekurhuleni, which is a big irritation for Ekurhuleni because they complain bitterly that everybody thinks they're Joburg. You're lucky here, everybody's in Cape Town and it's fine. But when it comes to, there's a big sort of turf war going on in Gauteng. But once again, even all the industrial buildings are in the north of Johannesburg. But you've got this significant portion of the population in the south. So there's a challenge going on there, a spatial challenge that has to be resolved. Let's look at Diepsloot and Alexandra as two examples. There's Diepsloot. That's a map of what it looks like at the moment, the road infrastructure with a very basic land cover behind it. And we can start looking at formal houses. The yellow dots are 94, the change of government. The red dots are houses that existed in 2001, and the black dots are houses which have appeared since 2001 to 2010. And you can see there's a significant growth in that area if you think that that's the only formal houses that existed in Diepsloot and how that's changed. The same with informal structures. The informal settlement started as Diepsloot, and it's slowly grown with all of these houses or structures appearing. The most significant one are the backyards. Those are the number of backyard structures in Diepsloot, and they didn't exist in 2001. They have appeared in the last 9 years. If we do the numbers, or if you look at this picture, this is what it looks like over a period of 8 years, how the place densifies. So going from a single structure on a property with one household, you now might have 3 or 4 households on the property. What's the implication for safety and security? What's the implication for service delivery, water, electricity, cell phone companies? Cell phone companies will tell you they put a tower up, they assume there's 400 people in there because there's 400 stands around it. Suddenly there's 800 or 900 cell phones, and they don't get it. They can't figure it out. That's the problem. Every single one of those people has access to water and electricity because they have a long extension lead coming out of the main house into these secondary and tertiary structures. So they're better off than in informal settlement. They also have tenure because they pay rent. But how do we deal with them? Are they informal, or are they formal, or what's the deal? But we can ask these questions now using this type of data. These are the analyses where you look at that. There is a growth. There's been a significant growth in informal houses, 200% over the period of 94 to 2001, and it went up even more between to 2010. The significant one is this. You can't calculate that because there weren't any backyards at one stage. There's now 19,000. But even in the case of Diepsloot, there's just marginally less backyard structures to which they are informals. So what's your problem in Diepsloot? The informals or it's the backyards? If you Audrey de la Rey from Eskom, he's going to say, well, these guys don't have access to electricity anyway, so they're not a problem. Every single one of those guys has some piece of electrical equipment that he's using, so he becomes a problem. These issues of these structure counts are quite interesting because we use them as a proxy for a census. So instead of going out and trying to count everybody, we map structures and then a portion of population sort of metric to a structure, and we can do this regularly and fairly, not automated, because I don't think that's 100% possible, but we can do it in a cost-effective manner, and that's just one interesting question. If we go on and we look at the lost for words, the sort of the spatial relationship between the residential and non-residential land uses. There's Diepsloot. And I just drew up a thing. I said, how many job opportunities or non-residential structures are within 5 kilometers of Diepsloot? If you look at those numbers, they're not many. If you think of the amount of structures that we have within Diepsloot, there's 171 sort of commercial ventures, and there's 62 industrial buildings. So where do people work? Those people need to go further than 5 kilometers to get their jobs. If we go further and we look at a place like Alexandra, there's been change in Alexandra. As you can see, it's not as dramatic, but there is definitely change. But look at those numbers. For the amount of buildings you have there, 8,000, 5,000, there's 1,800 commercial job opportunities, and there's 1,600 industrial job opportunities. This place makes sense, because people have access to work. Go back to that, that doesn't make sense. So it's technically in the wrong place. What do? Do you move industrial areas closer to it? Do you fix up the road network? What do you do? These are the questions that we're able to address. The other thing is, if you look at Johannesburg, it's surrounded by a lot of other municipalities. Within 5 kilometers, what's going on? If you think, this is old data, but this is all your residential land use is close to 700,000. Within 5 k's of Johannesburg, there's another 300,000. And people don't see those boundaries, they move backwards and forwards over them. So the city of Joburg can't map and only function within this area anymore. It needs to function within a bigger area. And they're not going to go out and try and do those intensive land use surveys on behalf of other municipalities so they can get this type of data and work with it. In summary, this bird's eye view is crucial because it gives them an independent assessment of what's going on. It ignores their IDPs, their SDFs, etc., but gives them crucial information. Joburg like to call this a multi-dimensional view because they have a temporal idea, they know what's going on over time, but they also now understand the difference between the non-residential and the residential areas, structures, etc. So they can start planning transportation routes, electricity usage and those things. It's also repeatable in the future based on new imagery and the same skill sets, and we give them a consistent view across the municipality. Then finally, this municipality is highly dynamic, as I've shown you. Informal settlements don't just stay there, they come and go, they move, they get more dense, they get de-densified. And a lot of the questions that we've been able to quantify here and say, what is a backyard structure, will have to be resolved through a socioeconomic study. We need to get somebody to go out and understand who lives in a backyard. Is it a migratory labourer who, in the case of Pretoria, lives in Malotu, but comes to work in Gauteng and rents a shack in the back of somebody's garden in Diepsloot? We don't know that information yet. And hopefully the census 2011 will give us that, but it's allowing us to at least start thinking about the right questions. And the one thing that's happened in Joburg now, they've looked at this data and they said, how are we going to deal with backyards? How big? We know the extent of the backyard structures. What can we do now? Do we not allow them because people, it's against the bylaws, or do we embrace them but allow the system to function around them? So when you build a property and you put an RDP structure on it, you assume 4 households are going to be on it and not just one. Those are questions that are going to come up. Thank you very much.